All right, President Trump is pushing for sweeping tax cuts and major tax reform. Why? To unleash the American economy and provide relief to the American people. Why? Because millions of Americans desperately need the help and the growth of the economy. Now, the president sat down with a group of bipartisan lawmakers at the White House earlier today, and here's what he said.
We have 4 principles for tax reform. Make the tax code simple and fair. Cut taxes substantially. It'll be the largest tax decrease in the history of our country for the middle class. Encourage companies to hire and grow in America. And by doing that, we're going to have to reduce the taxes for companies. Another bipartisan project that is urgently needed is infrastructure and infrastructure investment. It's time now to build new roads, new bridges, airports, tunnels, highways, and railways all across our great land. We don't want to forget DACA. And it's already been a week and a half, and people don't talk about it as much. We want to see if we can do something with regard to immigration, with regard to the 800,000 people that are now young people. They're not children anymore. They were children. Now they're young people. But we want to see if we can do something in a bipartisan fashion. We want to get our country working again and competing again worldwide, and there'll be nothing that can stop us.
Now, notice, but for DACA, the president was echoing everything he promised you in the campaign. Now, the president also wrote on Twitter earlier today, the approval process for the biggest tax cut and tax reform package in the history of our country will soon begin. Move fast, Congress. And he added, with Irma and Harvey devastation, tax cuts and tax reform is needed more than ever before. Go, Congress, go. Now, President Trump is right. The time for tax reform is right now. We did not do this since 1986. And tonight, the president dined with Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Here's what's happening. Look, the president is reaching across the aisle to try and get things done. Because let's face it, Republican leadership in Congress, they have failed miserably and at every turn. Now, Republican failure, their broken promises, they have now left the president with no other option if he's going to keep his promises to the American people. They have proven themselves to be incompetent, ineffective, and the president, frankly, I don't blame him. He's done waiting, and he's forging ahead with or without Mitch McConnell. We'll have more on him in just a second. But first, let's look at some of these statistics on how massive and how burdensome this tax system in this country has now become. Now, according to Republican members on the House Ways and Means Committee, the current federal tax code, look at this, over 70,000 pages. Who could ever comprehend that? Now, put that in perspective for you. Back in 1913, when the income tax was introduced, it was only 400 pages long. Now, the Tax Foundation also has an estimate that Americans spent 8.9 billion hours in tax preparation last year, and that translates to over $400 billion in lost productivity. Now, the president understands this all has to change because unlike the vast majority of politicians in the swamp and the sewer and the so-called policy wonks in D.C., well, the president, he's actually run a business. And here's what the president has been calling for. Pay close attention. He wants bold tax cuts and tax reforms. He wants an emphasis on benefiting the middle class, including middle-class tax cuts. He wants 7 brackets to go to 3 brackets to make it easy and simple. He wants that 15% corporate tax rate. Why? Because that makes American businesses more competitive on the global stage. And, of course, he's been talking about allowing multinational corporations, to repatriate trillions of dollars that they have sitting overseas at a low rate. And that way they can invest in American workers and build factories and manufacturing centers right here in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania. And, of course, he's also pushing energy independence. Why? Because there are literally millions of high-paying career jobs available. And the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, he's saying the administration wants to make these tax cuts retroactive. Wow, people start spending money. Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who will join us in just a minute, he's also offering up his own tax reform plan. Now, here's the senator explaining today what you, the American people, need and why you need tax reform. Take a look.
Our economy since World War II has grown on average 3.3% a year. And yet, for the past 8 years, we've been mired in stagnation. From 2008 to 2012, the economy grew on average 0.9% a year. Ronald Reagan was elected on a promise of tax cuts, of tax reforms. We saw historic tax reform in 81 and 86. And by the fourth year of Reagan's presidency, 1984, we went from stagnant economic growth, less than 1% a year, to 7.2% a year. Massive, booming growth, lifting millions out of poverty, increasing significantly median incomes.
Senator Cruz was right. In the Reagan years, Reagan went from 70 to 28%, top marginal tax rates in this country. Okay, how did it result? Government doubled the revenues that they had in 8 years. 20 million new jobs were created. And by the way, here are the highlights of what Senator Cruz is proposing. This makes perfect sense, and it's simple, and it's easy, and it's basic, and it's fundamental. A low, flat tax rate. Tax returns that can be filed on a postcard, immediate expensing for businesses, a low corporate tax rate, the repatriation, ending the death tax, getting rid of the alternative minimum tax. Now, President Trump and Senator Cruz's philosophy on tax reform is simple. They want to get the government off your back and let you keep more of your hard-earned money in your wallet, spend it the way you want. And as we've been seeing, President Trump is working nonstop. He wants to get his major agenda items passed with members of Congress, meeting with them day and night, and by taking his message on the road and speaking directly to the American people. Now it's time for Congress. I cannot believe they have no urgency. Get your job done. And I'm specifically talking about you, Senator Mitch McConnell, and the never-Trumpers out there, like, let's see, John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Jeff Flake. Oh, Ben Sasse, we'll add him to the list. You know what? It's now or never. And by the way, no more excuses as to why you can't keep your promises. Oh, it's so hard. Oh, for 7.5 years, you promised to repeal, replace Obamacare, and you couldn't get it done. No more blaming the president, like Mitch McConnell did last month. And he said the president had excessive expectations, and, well, he doesn't understand the parliamentary procedures and the difficulties of legislation because he's never done this before. Take a look.
Now, our new president had, of course, not been in this line of work before, and I think had excessive expectations about how quickly things happen in the democratic process.
That's so pathetic. That's the swamp. That's the sewer. And now, according to roll call, Senator McConnell is now saying tax reform may have to wait until next year. This is pathetic. It's inexcusable. It's unacceptable. Why did we elect you? Now it's time for an ultimatum. Senator McConnell, other Republicans, if you don't get the urgency to work for the American people and you don't pass tax reform by the end of this year, you need to resign, go home, play golf, and get out of the way. And let's get people in those positions that can serve the American people. I'm tired of the complacency and business as usual. You know what? It's not been working. Congress is now failing the American people. 50 million Americans in poverty, 50 million on food stamps, 90+ million out of the labor force, lowest home ownership rate in 51 years. Really? This is why Congress, you have an approval rating that hovers around 15 wonderful percent. It's why Mitch McConnell has a dismal 18% approval rating in his own home state of Kentucky. Now, instead of whining and complaining and pointing figures about why you can't pass legislation, you people in Washington and Congress, time to roll up your sleeves, get in a room. I'll send you pizza and beer, and turn off the air conditioner like our framers and founders, and get to work, and don't leave the room until you build consensus to help people. You know, it's not like these issues or ideas are new, just like with Obamacare. What have you been doing? You've been promising and promising and running and elect us and elect us. The American people, you've been doing this for years. And you know what? You said you're going to do this. You said you'll cut taxes. You said you'll pass reform. You said you'll repeal and replace. Where is your sense of urgency? Every American I know has a sense of urgency on their job. Where's your accountability? Now, the president can't do everything on his own. You need to hold up your end of the bargain. You need to accomplish something for once.